All right, today we're going to continue on with classes and work out some more uses of classes, and then finally get to inheritance, which is important in the Android development system. So we already have our method in here, and we used another class that we created last week called getData, and this had different methods. And we talked about constructors with different parameters. So we have two different constructors here based on the number of parameters that get passed to it. So you can overload the constructor is basically what you're doing. You're having multiple constructors. So let's create a new class. So we can do that by right-clicking on source and say new Java class. And we're going to create an animal class. How about that? This should be familiar to you, those that took Ruby. So, and that's the reason I'm doing it, so you have something to compare it against. So an animal class has the same types of properties. I can have an animal class that has fields. They call them fields, or we call them instance variables in Ruby. Same concept. So I can have my animal have a name. So I'm going to have a name for my animal. And we need to have a constructor for our class, right? We need to have a way of creating our new animal. In Ruby, we did that with what method? No. What was it inside the class, though? What was the name of the method inside the class that constructed that object? Initialize, right, initialize. So we created the initialize method, and we passed in parameters to that, etc. So for these, we're creating whether or not we want it to be public or private. Typically, constructors are public, otherwise you couldn't create objects outside of it. So we're going to create, and we call it the same name as the class. And then we can have multiple parameters that we pass into it or not. So let's create a constructor that has that passes in the name. So we have to declare a variable in our parameter list here, and we'll call it name. And then how do you think you'd assign that name into our object's instance variable here? But nope, I don't need them. A static class makes it, yeah. No, you can still pass variables to them. So yeah, you say name equals name, right? Now, in Ruby that would work fine, but in Java we have to explicitly declare which object we're dealing with, and so we have to use the keyword this. We have to say this dot. And so that says now I'm going to take the parameter that you passed in, I'm going to assign it to this object's property called name. So now when I create a new animal, it will have a field associated with it, which is the name of the animal. All right. So any questions on that so far? Very similar to Ruby. Let's go and try to get some information. So let's throw away some of this stuff, and let's create a new animal. So to create a new animal, we have to create a variable to hold it, and we have to declare what type that variable is. So if I'm going to create a new object from the animal class, what type would I declare that as? An integer, a string, a what? I need a variable. I'm going to call it zebra. So what type does that zebra have to be? What was that? An animal, right? We have to say that is an animal that I'm creating. So I have a new animal class, so I can say zebra is now going to be what type of an object? An animal object, right? Just like in Ruby. And then I assign that, and I call the constructor for the animal class. So the constructor, if I use the IntelliSense, well, it didn't on this case, interestingly. I need to pass in the name, right? There's got to be some string that it's expecting, and I'm going to call it, I don't know, Ryan the zebra. All right, so now zebra is a variable that is an animal object, and that has different properties. So we found out we have some shortcuts in IntelliJ, so I can say sout tab, and isn't that nice? It prints out system.out.println, and let's just print out the zebra.name. That is the field or the property or the instance variable of that particular object. So let's print that guy. And it prints Ryan. Isn't that great? So the classes, the objects that you have should be familiar to you from Ruby. It's the same concept. An object not only has values associated with it, it has state. And the state or the behavior of that object is defined with what? How do I define behavior in classes? Inside the class, right? But how do I define that? Okay, so, right, we use methods. We create methods to act as behavior on our object. And we can tell our object to do something. So let's create a behavior for our animal before we move on. And a behavior would just be another method. So we need to define our method. We need to make it public so that outside world can call this particular behavior. And we'll call it speak, right? Didn't we do that before? And we need to have something that it says, so we're going to call it a message. And notice that it says I have an invalid method declaration, return type required. So I don't, it depends on how you write this. I'm going to I'm not going to use prints or puts inside of my classes. I prefer not to do that. So what would this speak return? A string. So I need to tell it, just like in C#, I need to tell it what type of value is going to be returned from this method. All right. So then I'm going to say return and then something. So let's do something more than just the message, because that's not as much fun. Let's say the name whoever that name of that guy is, of this object, says whatever the message comes in to be. Okay, got that? So the name is going to come from the property of this particular object. And in this case, I don't have to use the this. It's probably a good idea to do that just so you know what it is, but it's not exactly required. So let's go and actually execute that method then, that behavior. So I can only do that behavior if I have a zebra object, and I happen to have one, or an animal object, sorry. So I can tell my zebra, let's print out whatever my zebra says. So he's going to say, what? What does a zebra say? Whoopee. I don't know.
He said Mufasa.
Did he say Mufasa? Thank you. Okay, we'll say Mufasa. Thank you. All right, so he'll say Mufasa. So let's run that. And it says it picked up Ryan from the object itself, the zebra object, and it it added the word says and then printed out the message that was passed into that behavior. So now I have a behavior that my zebra can do. He can speak. All right, any questions on that? So we have state, which is represented by the instance methods, instance variables, sorry, and I have behavior or actions that can happen on that data. That's what a class does. And it tries to encapsulate all of that information about an object, about this animal inside of that object. All right, any questions on that? All right, so not only does an animal have a name, let's give him some more properties. Let's give him how many legs he has. So how would I represent that in my animal class? An integer, okay, because it's gonna be a number, so it's gonna be an integer, and we'll call it legs. All right. So how do I assign that information to my animal class, to my animal object when it gets created? Where do I do that? In the constructor, okay? So the constructor is like the initialize method in Ruby again. So I'm going to do something in here. I'm going to say this.legs equals some number. Now, I'm not passing that information in here. I'm just assuming that my animals all have 4 legs. So if I don't pass in a number of legs, I'm going to assume that he's got 4, okay? So I'm assigning that. So let's go just make sure that works. I can say, I love that shortcut, S out, jeez. Thank you, Doug, for that one. So I can say zebra.legs. Okay, I can print out how many legs he has. So let's go do that. So he's got 4 legs. Yay! All right. So how could I create an animal that had a different number of legs? Like a what? A human or something, right? So how do I do that? Okay, I could change the number after the fact. Since that's a public field, I can say zebra.legs equals 2. And then let's print out how many legs he has, make sure that that actually works. So again, I can access those values, those instance variables for that particular object, and reassign them if I want to. All right, so that's the same as in Ruby. So let's add a way of adding the legs instead. Now, I could change the constructor, but that would make all of my previous assignments to this not work. I'd have to change every call to that. So I can create or overload this constructor and create another way of creating an animal. All right? So just like we did last week, I could create a new constructor, and I can have him pass in the name and the number of legs that he has. So that's a whole new constructor that would take the data and put it into the right instance variables. So how would I do that? How do I add that data into the instance variables? Same as up here, right? So I'm going to copy and paste this and modify this a little bit. Instead of setting it to 4, I'm going to set it to legs. So now this is a new way of creating an animal, and Java knows that because this is called the combination of the name of the constructor and the number and type of its parameters is called its signature. There's a signature associated with this particular constructor, and it's different than this signature because this has only one parameter, even though the name is the same. Okay, so Java is able to anticipate that, and if I pass in 2 parameters, it's going to call this constructor. If I pass in 1 parameter, it's going to call this constructor. All right, so let's run that real quick. So I can say, let's create a new animal, and we'll call it, Moose. Okay, a moose. Well, let's make it something. Okay, there you go. Snake has, is that considered an animal?
Yeah, it would be like
Why would it not be considered an animal?
I guess it's an animal, isn't it? So that's fine. It's not a mammal. It's a animal. Gotcha. So we'll call it Sammy. And okay, we'll call it Snake. Fine. Oh yeah, the name is animal, right? So we're going to say it's a new animal, and we're going to pass in that his name is Sammy, and he's got 0 legs, right? So just by the fact that I passed in 2 parameters, it's going to call the second constructor that I created, and then let's just print out the snake's name. Make sure that I actually created an object. All right, Sammy, I got Sammy back out. So in the second invocation of this new animal line, it's calling this constructor, the multiple number constructor. Okay? So to make this drier, so we don't repeat ourselves, this is repeating itself in this method down here. Wouldn't it be nicer if I don't assign this and have only one place where this is created? So inside of my animal with only the name constructor, I want to pass all that information to my more detailed animal with maybe some hard-coded number of legs here. Okay, so to do that, I call a method. I need to run this animal constructor and pass it 2 pieces of information instead. So to do that, I have to say this with parentheses. Okay, this becomes what? It's like calling animal itself. Animal. I want to call the animal method this constructor, this animal's constructor, but I want to pass it 2 values instead. Okay, so now I'm only assigning or doing constructive type things in one method. Everybody see how that works? So if I call it with a single name, I'm going to call it internally, I'm going to call the second constructor with 2 parameters instead, hard coding the number of legs as 4. All right, so let's just make sure that all still works. It does. Yay! Isn't that sweet? Isn't that cool stuff?
So basically, we're adding back.
Yes. You go, so if I added something that had 3 values here, I would hard code the 3rd value and call the next one down. Yes. So let's do that. What other property might I have? Let's give them a color, right? So I need a new constructor, and we will add in the fact that he's going to have a string of the color of this animal, and I'm going to say this dot color equals color. And why is this staying red here? I haven't defined it. Now, unlike Ruby just allows you to create things on the fly, Java does not. It has to know what type of data this is so it can compile it correctly into its bytecode. You can. You can. Yep. So both of these are different variables that are of string type. All right. So now, how would I modify my animal that only has 2 parameters in its constructor to call this animal that has 3 constructors. All right, so I'd have to, instead of doing anything inside of here, I'm going to call this, which is calling the animal. And notice how this has got 3 constructors here. Just a string, string and a legs, string and a legs and a color. So I'm going to call the string and the legs and the color, the name and the legs and the color. And the color has got to be some hard-coded value. So I have to have a default for people that don't want something. So I'm going to say unknown here. I don't know what color he is. All right, so now I've got 3 different ways of creating an animal. And see, this can start to become tedious, but that's the only way you can do that in Java. It has to have specific parameter lists and different constructors if you want to do that. Whereas in Ruby, I could create arbitrary lists of parameters that come in and pick and choose the ones that come in and create the object the same way. This didn't matter, which I kind of like. Okay, so let's create a new guy that's a new animal, and we'll call it I don't know what do we want? A bear. How about a bear? And we'll call it Yogi, and he's got 4 legs, and he's going to be black. He's a black bear. Is he a black bear? I have no idea. So he's probably brown. So let's print out bear.color and see if I get the color all the way to the end. And then let's also print out the snake.color and see what that property has now to make sure that value gets set correctly. So my snake is unknown and my bear is black. So that's all working correctly. Any questions on that? Does that make sense? Constructing our object, setting properties. All right, let's create a method now. I want you to create a method called describe, and it will return a string. So the method's going to be called describe, returns a string, which is a sentence that has all the properties of the animal. All right, so create a new behavior, a new action, a new method in my animal class that does this. Right? Questions on that? Do it. All right, so we need to make this behavior public so we can call it from the outside. It's going to return a value of string, and we'll call it describe. So that's how we set up our method. We don't need anything in the parameter list. Excuse me. So we just need to return a string that has information in it. It says something like, my name is, and we're going to concatenate his name, and then we're going to say, I have some number of legs, and I am the color. All right, so I'm missing a plus sign here. That's the problem. All right, so this will return one big old long string. My name is Sammy. I have 0 legs, and I am black or green or whatever the color is. So let's run that. How would I call that method? I just have to remember that it's going to return a string. Oops, That's interesting. So I'm going to call the bear dot describe. I want the bear to describe himself. And then let's also do the snake dot describe. Oh, I need snake. Come on. All right, let's run that. And so now it says, my name is Yogi, I have 4 legs and I am black. My name is Sammy, I have 0 legs and I am unknown. So this could be a start of a guessing game, right? That'd be fun. 20 questions or something. All right, any questions on that? No? Because the plus sign is overloaded for Java, just like it is in, well, actually Ruby doesn't do that. I'd have to convert this to an integer, to a string, right? It will automatically convert an integer into a string in this case. That's the way the language is written. Otherwise, I would have to do, how would I convert it? I have to do something like this. I have to do integer dot to string of my legs, and that would be the same thing.
Oh, it does have a two-string.
Yeah, it does have a 2 string.
So it got overloaded.
Right, it overloaded the plus sign for concatenation, right? So it allows that. Okay, good question.
So it parses everything just like C#.
Yeah, C# but very close to C#. It's a C-based language, so it's.
Is the whole length version then basically identical, or is there anything that would?
No, it's not identical. You couldn't just take a C# program.
Which raises the question, why would you touch it?
Why what?
Why would you touch it?
Yeah, right. All right, good question. Any other questions on that?
Yeah, that was what was taking me so long, is I didn't think it was going to
You didn't just try it. Yeah, good.
Ways to make it convert
Yep, good.
Said, screw it, I'll wait till class.
It's a good question. So you just tried it, Doug, and it worked, right? Yeah, so you can make some assumptions, and if it doesn't work, then fall back and try to fix it. Yeah.
No, it's not going to automatically.
Yeah, I have that problem in most languages, trying to figure that out. So I just try it the way I think it should be, and then happens to work. So I'm happy. Yeah. It's funny how Ruby is actually more strict in that case. I don't know why they don't allow that, but which is why we use that interpolation. Remember that interpolation symbol? Yeah. So, all right, good. So tomorrow we'll talk about inheritance, and we'll create some specific animals that inherit all of these properties from the animal class. All right.